Hi, so today on BizeX, we have a very special guest, Hazel Xavier Venkatraman. She's come all the way from Norway. And Hazel is one of our alumni of the Zebek University. Of course, we don't run a university, but she's an alumni. She worked with us, I think, 2 decades ago,
Yes.
Hazel. And Zebek, of course, as you all know, is a strategic branding and marketing company. So let me give you a quick introduction of Hazel. She's had a very illustrious career in sales, IT, edtech. She runs a women's business network in Norway. She's also on the board of a local women's football team. Very, very impressive, Hazel, I must say.
Thank you.
And I'm saving the best for the last. She is now a budding politician and is also on the board of the Committee of City Planning of the city of Sandefjord. Yeah, so welcome, Hazel, to the podcast, and we're looking forward to hearing your views on AI, marketing, sales, edtech, etc. So let's start. So I'd like to know a little bit about your entrepreneurship journey in Norway. So what inspired you to become an entrepreneur?
Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's very nice to be here.
You're welcome.
No, actually, there was no, it was not like I want to do something kind of journey. It was more like because I was looking for a job and my husband was already running a company. And then we saw the missing gap in different areas. So we said, okay, let's start doing the edtech part where we saw that edtech, what we had was a 3D learning. It was a 3D software which was delivered for science. And we saw there was no visual learning. And then we spoke to some teachers and that's how 3D learning was born. That was in 2017. So we started it with a startup camp and then it was an innovation camp. And then we started doing the proof of business. We actually had a first customer before we had the product built. And that's how we built the product with the customer. So that's where we started the entrepreneur journey for me, at least. Yeah.
Great. So, what would you say is the difference between being a professional, since you also worked? I mean, you were an employee with different companies and then you became an entrepreneur. So, what would you say is the difference between being a professional working in a company and being on your own? So, how would you differentiate that?
In Norway, I think I've learned the hard way. Working in Norway is much more secured. Of course, you get your salary and you're learning a lot. You have more flexibility in a different way because Norway has a flat hierarchy system, so you learn anyway. But then when you do things on your own, you get the flexibility, but then there's a lot of other things that you have to cope on your own. Since Norway is a small market, so you're fighting for the money that everybody's fighting for. So there is that you can do both, but depends on what you want to do. If you're really passionate about being an entrepreneur, then you do that. Or even working in Norway, you can grow in a company up to very high levels if you're good at your job.
So, we think there's a lot of competition in India for businesses. So, Norway is no different. Maybe it's a smaller market.
Yeah.
So, the challenges are probably different.
Yeah.
So, what are the key lessons you learned from running your own business?
In the initial days, of course, you're a little bit blind. You run on blindfolds when you run a business because you have this idea, the passion, and you want to just go ahead. But then as the years pass, I think the key for me was to involve the right people on the board, on the advisory board, which was something I missed, I think, in the initial days of 3DL. So that was the main thing. I think the people become a very important part, especially from different aspects. Then you get the opinions in of people and they help you. That also open the doors for networking. So I think that is one of the things that I misread in the initial years of our business, that I thought, okay, we just need the teachers. We need the technicians. We need the designers. But then later on, I realized, no, we need an accountant. We need the different perspectives to run the business because they have their way of looking things, which I probably am not looking at. So I think that is something I learned. And very early on, I think also realized that we were focused on sales, but when we kind of missed the marketing part, which also is an important thing when you start a business, you have to kind of have that in mind, that little bit of that why and the passion of why are you doing this? What is the reason? What is the problem you're solving? So all that, we had all that, but we couldn't bring it out. So I think those things, I see that I lost that a bit in compared to other startup companies in Norway.
The storytelling part.
Yeah.
The story you're trying to say, the why of the business, the why of the product, what is selling,
And what are we solving?
and what are you solving, and the key challenge you're solving.
Okay.
So that's a very interesting thing what you said, that you got the advisory board rather late, but you still got an advisory board. So I think for all you would-be entrepreneurs, I think that's a very good message what she's given, that the advisory board not only advises you on certain aspects of the business, but they also help you with networking opportunities. So take note of that, guys. All those people who are interested in running your business. So we cannot now not. I mean, while we're moving ahead with the podcast, we would like to know, being a woman, we need to play the woman card, Jesus. So, how has being a woman shaped your whole entrepreneurship journey? Has it made any difference? Is there a difference at all when being a man or a woman running a business in Norway?
No, in Norway, actually, this is a conversation I was just having with colleagues before we came here because people ask me in Norway, did you have a problem in India? And I said, frankly speaking, I never faced a problem in India. I never felt that me being a woman was a problem in India. And it's the same in Norway also. I don't think that's the problem. In fact, it's an advantage for me in Norway because I'm an immigrant woman. Take it positively. And I'm from India. That's even more positive. So I never felt either in India or in Norway. I think it's competence. It's again the people you know. I believe in that a lot. Personally, I feel it's who you know, how you've got there, and who's backing you up. That helps a lot, man or woman.
I totally agree with you. I don't think I also say this to a lot of people who say that. I think, honestly, once you're running the business, I don't think there's any difference between a man and a woman. I mean, you are the leader who needs to take the company to X or Y, and that's where the buck stops. I don't think gender comes into it at all. So, all you guys playing the man or the woman card, stop doing so immediately.
And you're one of the OGs. Arwala, you were the first. I still remember meeting Kiran in the first meeting I had. And she was like, she came across as a neutral person. So she's one of the OGs in the business. So AI can come, but then she's the OG. So she's done it the right way.
Thank you. You're too kind, Hazel. So, what are the challenges did you face running a business? See, we all know that entrepreneurship is very hard. I mean, it's glamorized and everything. And today, of course, it's very, very cool to run a business. But we all know that the people who actually run a business, it's very cool, very challenging, but it's not easy. So, what are the problems? What are the really, head-on challenges you took on?
For us, for me, or for our team, for me, it was mostly the speed of working because I work very fast and I had to learn the hard way. That is not going to help. That work style is not going to work in Norway because they work very slow. So that patience I had to build. That was frustrating because I was ready already with everything. But then, of course, my customer was not ready. My other colleagues were not ready. So that is a cultural style which took me some time to get used to that. I cannot run because nobody's running with me. I'm the only one running. Yeah, that's true. So that I learned the hard way. And then I had to, make the adjustments. So I always say Norway has taught me discipline. India has taught me speed. So I have to learn to play this at the right time. And I've learned it over the years.
Very well said. Very well said. I must say that. And I think most entrepreneurs, most people who run a business, they are the typical personality A types. So also they are very impatient because they are natural drivers. Otherwise, you cannot run a business. And it's hard. All need to learn patience. And let me tell you, after 34 years, I'm still learning patience. And I cannot say I have mastered it. So what advice would you give aspiring women entrepreneurs? And I don't only say women entrepreneurs. I'd like to say, what advice would you like to give entrepreneurs? Whether it's in Norway or in India.
I think when you have an idea, I would say that the first thing is don't wait to build it all. Go out, check, test, come back, get your first customer. Even if it's a prototype, do that. Get the right mentors in place. I think that's very important because they are the ones who will actually help you and guide you. Then the investors, of course, come. The money is important. I'm not saying no, but if you have the right people and you're testing the product, you've got like the customer saying, I'm ready to put the money on this, do that pretty early in the market. Don't wait till you build everything. Because I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs, they wait, especially in technology, they wait to build the correct product. But there is no perfect product in technology because you're always going to find a bug. There's always going to be a problem. And there's always going to be some new technology that you have to master. So it's better to build. I think you test and you build and you come back to the tables. This is what
the classical MVP.
Yes.
Which probably people still have not got the memo on that. And it's all, perfection is always ingrained in us and we think that we should come out with the perfect product. But I guess in the initial stages, the first and most important thing is to get the minimum viable product out. And that book is a brilliant book, by the way, for anybody who has not read it. So now I'd like to come to the most interesting bit of your life right now as we speak. So you are now in a public leadership role. I think that's a very amazing step. Let me tell you, today you're on this podcast actually for this. Being an Indian, an immigrant, having an ambition to be in a public leadership role in Norway is truly impressive. So tell us a little bit about that. How did it come about? Why did you decide to take on this role? And what's the acceptance rate for you, considering you're not a Norwegian by birth?
Well, I have already built the network I had in Norway for so many years now because I've done the Women Business Network. And so then it was, of course, my partner, my husband, who also encouraged me because he felt that with my network and my people skills, this is going to be like, I'm not the kind of person who wants to go and save the world. Let's put that out there. I'm more one problem at a time. I said, okay, let me try it. And the party that I've joined, I know that I wanted to because it's more focused on business and innovation. So I already know that I was going to be there. So that was one of the reasons. And yes, it is not easy, but I have made the network where people saw me as a business person who has got things done in the city. So I got the votes I needed to come into there. I'm a member of a committee. So it's not a leadership position yet, but I'm a member of a committee that takes care of the environmental planning of the city. So anything that is getting built, any new projects that comes to us, so we need to discuss it. And, we go through our due diligence process and we have 5 of us on the team. And I'm also part of the board of the party, where it makes it more interesting because then I see how the back end of the party works.
Very, very impressive. So, see, now that you've been in corporate life, you run your own business, and now you're in a public, it's a public profile. I mean, being in a party. So, what would you say that business leaders need to learn from politicians, and politicians what they can learn from business? I mean, and I think this is a question is relevant to people around the world. If you ask me, a lot of things today, the world is a village. So, I mean, whatever your answer would be, I think it would help all of us in India as well.
Yeah. In Norway, politics is a bit different. It's very people driven. So we cannot sit and just make the decisions. We have to discuss with the other parties. We have to collaborate and then we have to take all the people. So we cannot just decide we want to build something. It doesn't work like that. So there is, and also when it comes to private. So I've learned a lot. I use both the skills in both the places. In politics, it goes extremely slow. So you cannot do anything. You have to wait. So that teaches me the collaborative skills, which you will not learn in private businesses because you still move a little faster. Norway moves slowly anyway compared to rest of the world. But in politics, you have to have a lot of patience in Norway because it is not something that you can just sit there even though you know you're right. You have to wait till everybody's on board and the people are on board and you have to listen to people. You have to go meet them and listen to them whining even though you feel that this is best for the city, but it's not that. So patience and collaboration is something that you learn from politics, which you can apply into business. And again, private businesses run differently in Norway. Of course, there is a bit more faster decision making, but still Norway is a very slow decision making country. It doesn't everything doesn't move fast. So that is something, as I pointed out earlier, that it was a tough transition for me because I felt I was ready with the product. I could sell. Everything is fine. Why not buying it? But no, they had their due diligence too. So it's a group. It is never one person taking the decision. It's always a group.
You have to build a consensus.
Yes, consensus and trust. Those are the 2 things you need in Norway if you're going to do anything in Norway.
So I guess, there are different kinds of organizations. So organizations which are disruptive, which is normally in early stage, is where you don't build consensus necessarily because you need to charge ahead because by the time you build consensus, they may no longer be the first movers. But in an older organization, which has got all its systems and templates and business models set, which is very much like a political party, you need to build consensus to move ahead. Okay. I think it's very well, you distinguished it pretty well, I would say. So the whole community thinking, basically building that consensus and taking it ahead, I mean, that's the only way policy is shaped. There's no one single person cannot really march ahead, even though the ideas are better. Okay. Well, sometimes I guess it's not the best way to move forward, but that is the way, I suppose.
Yes, you have to. Sometimes I get frustrated. I think, what, one person should take the decision and just move. But it's an old system which might change in the future. But right now it's difficult to shake it. Then you have to really stand strong. There are people who do it, but then you have to really, really stand strong because you're one and then everybody else.
So that's a typical, the old style. I mean, like I said, the mature organizations, it's always, this is the way decision making is done. Of course, now that we are in 2026, we cannot not discuss AI. Gen AI. AI has always been as part of tech, but now it's the world of generative AI. So how would you put the AI in business today in Norway? What is your thoughts on that?
I recently did an AI discovery document for a company in the US because they wanted to step foot into Norway for AI automation. So I was a bit surprised because Norway is one of the countries that is almost 46.6%, if I'm not wrong, is using AI on a daily basis. And then I thought this should be an easy job and this should be very positive. But then I spoke to 6 companies, all from the top big companies and the small ones. So yes, everybody is using AI, but the AI, what are they using AI for is still not clear. So the AI readiness is not there. That yes, you're using AI, but are you using your data? Because what you can use the AI for is the existing data. Have you got the data? What are you going to make use of? How are you going to scale? Because I think AI should be used for scaling up the current data. So they have to sort the data. And in Norway, when you talk data, immediately GDPR comes in the picture. So that's where I think you will have some issues in Norway. I think maybe probably already have, which will be GDPR. So I think that's something I feel is a bit more. A company has to start looking at their data, how to structure it, and then implement AI and see how they can scale it. Not just use AI for using AI, because your competitors can buy the same tool, but it's up to you. What is the extra factor that you are adding to get that AI to a better pace?
Very well said. And we were discussing earlier where you said it was a very interesting perspective you had said AI readiness is mostly not about AI. So, what did you mean by that?
I mean, it's not about just buying the tools, like getting the license for Copilot or ChatGPT or Claude. It's more like, okay, what are the problems you're going to solve with it? Very well. What is your issue today in your organization where you have a bottleneck? Can AI be used for that? Have you sat down and done a strategy on it? So I think it's very much on what you guys work in strategy, which people are kind of skipping. They're getting away from the sad, like the tough work. If you use that and build from down under, AI is very useful because your competitors can buy the tools. But if you're not able to use what can give to your clients, for example, in pricing or marketing, is everybody can generate an ad. Even I'm horrible at writing. But today I write like a Audacity Pro because of AI. But that's because but not necessarily I can last with it. I can't create a business on it because eventually I'll be caught because of it. So what I feel that we should not forget our innovation skills, our thinking skills, our discussion skill, and AI is a tool. We feed the data, and so it's very data driven. So whatever data we have, we need to identify what we can use it for. How do we structure it, even for our clients, and what is the advantage out of it? So I think that's something leaders have to reflect on when they're using when they're going to use AI in the company. But what is it? And the readiness for the employees. And are they ready on board? Are you taking them with you? So that's also an important part.
Yeah, sometimes it's very hard. I mean, the people who are the younger generation, obviously, they could be like native AI users. And a little, the guys who've been in the system maybe for 10, 15 years. So there is resistance because they are used to working in a particular way. But what we've seen in our company, like we have Gen Z and a smaller percentage of Gen X. And what we find is it took them maybe a year, but now I see more and more people from the Gen X embracing it, which is really very heartening but it took them some time. So the people who start using Gen AI from day one, it's much easier. But then see the people who've got the experience can actually bring much more to the table once they embrace Gen AI.
Definitely.
Is what I think.
And the knowledge base,
Yeah.
which the young generation doesn't have, which is a little bit scary. Correct. Because they're going to lose out on the knowledge, then they'll just be dependent beyond the AI. So there has to be a mix of both.
Yeah, so that is the fear where the younger generation is concerned that everybody is concerned about that the knowledge may be very surface level and they may not even be interested in digging deep because they don't need to dig deep anymore. I mean, AI does a lot of the work, as we all know. So now what should, before that, I want to ask you another question that you said 40 to 50% were already using AI, but what were they using it for? So what were they using it for?
It's different. Like mostly they use it as an LMS. Like, to write mails, maybe some documents. And I use it also to read documents. Like if I don't like to read, so I put the document up and I read and I get the pointers. So I think this is what people are using it for now. They make an agent or an assistant and they get some work done with some Excel work. So it's still very top level in us. So yeah, very like on the surface. So I think that's why I feel there is a lot more to be done where they're not using it in the right way. So right now it's just more because I spoke to one company which is quite big. So she said they did have their own AI base in the US and the company is also in Norway. And they said, we're not done. We have it, but we have ChatGPT, but nothing else is being done. Because the GDPR for that company, it's a health company. and they have to be careful with the data they're using, that they have to make sure that everything is in place. So in Europe, at least, we're going to have that problem with everything. That even EdTech, when I was running, that was a problem. I used to use a lot of time doing the data agreement with the schools and the communes, because
Yeah, as a the privacy laws are very, very strict there, unlike, of course, in India. So, and I guess it's rightfully so. I mean, today that's the fear we have, right? All my knowledge also is right out there. So, on one prompt, we are actually continuously educating on the AI platform.
you're experimenting your prompts and your
The experience people are doing that. So, well, it's a true democratization of knowledge, I guess, and practical applied intelligence. But yeah, AI is here to stay. That's a given. And its only thing is, I agree that it has to be used intelligently. And when I'm talking about this is one thing which is coming to my mind is, I think, don't you think so? I mean, is it the same in Norway that people need to do continuous learning today? I mean, if you are going to be in any kind of a workplace, or whether it's a politician, running a business, working somewhere, being a teacher, I think the way the world is moving, and it was always so, but today it's all the more reason for us to be continuously learning. What do you have to say about that?
Oh, I agree with you 100%. That is something I keep telling my kids. You can do your masters, but willing to learn, because you have to keep learning. There is no stop. Any of us, you or me, I think that's a skill that should be on the resume. That I'm an agile learner. I can learn, because if you're not adaptive to your work environment, you will get stuck. People are scared of AI. I mean, you don't have to be scared of AI if you get yourself educated. You can move with it. But if you don't want to learn, then yes, then you should be scared of AI, because then you're not moving. So I think learning is a very important skill today for everybody, whichever field you are in. You have to keep updating yourself, keep in touch with what's happening.
So, since you were in edtech and training and stuff like that, I mean, don't you think all organizations can learn to use Gen AI much more in depth instead of just using it for mails and things like that? I mean, and just reading data. I mean, there's so many more things they can do with it.
It can.
So, don't you think there's an opportunity there for?
There is an opportunity. I see Microsoft does a lot of that already. There are companies connected. But Norway, Middle East, I have to point out, because I have a friend who's working for a company in the Middle East. They are actually really implementing AI in schools and businesses.
How are they implementing it in schools?
They are doing it with training with Microsoft Copilot, how the teachers can use Teams, how they can integrate it, how they can make lesson plans using Copilot. And that's something I think in Norway we are lacking. And that is something I had a problem with. Again, it was because Norwegian teacher age group is all, the ones that are there now, they're 50 plus. The young ones are coming in. They are adaptive. And we used to do VR and AR also. So we struggled to sell VR to the elder generation. There were like 5% of them who learned and used it, whereas it would just be sitting there. So this is a learning thing. If you're not ready to learn, and if your organization does not give you that space or the structure to learn, and it's two ways, of course, then it'll be difficult. Because a teacher uses a lot of time in the classroom, and then she can't use that time to learn. So he or she needs a bit of extra time to learn. So the Middle East is doing a great job. I've been following them. Africa is doing a great job with it. So I think Europe has to catch up on. In Norway, at least, we're very good at using technology. We have the money, we have the technology. Implementation can take a bit of time over that.
So, when I said learning, what I meant is, I understand that Microsoft or Claude or ChatGPT will have training sessions, especially developed countries. But what I mean to say is the mindset to learn. That's like a psychological thing. So what happens is people think that, okay, now I'm working, I have the experience of 30 years, there's nothing more to learn. So how do you change that mindset? That this is a mindset.
This is a mindset change.
Because honestly, most of us are now self-taught out, Chennai. Nobody taught me, frankly speaking. But what is a mindset change? And that I feel sometimes it's in youngsters also. It's not just...
No, it's youngsters, yeah.
It's also youngsters. They think, okay, now we passed our exams, we've got our degree. And that's it. But that's really not it. That's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, your real life starts after that, right? So how do we inculcate this mindset of continuous learning in the day?
I've seen that. I think it's to do with like if we have to start with coaching, leadership skills, all this, because children are not taught these things. We're not teaching our children how to be leaders from school, money management, and what they should achieve. Because the only thing we're giving them the books and telling them read. But what are they going to do with it? Like that's why my kids go to IB, and I like the IB system. That was one of the reasons I chose IB, because I feel they make them make presentations. They are making them ready for the future with standing up and giving presentations, to arguments, making your present talking in public, speaking. I think these are the things we are not lighting the fire underneath. We have to do as parents, as adults, as teachers. We need to get them to go. We have to tell them what they have to do, talk to them, and that's not easy. Not all parents, like my parents, didn't have that resource. I was self-learned. I got people like you in my life who I looked up to and I learned. Not everybody. I think it's each individual also. Do you have that need to fire? The fire has a new reason. So everybody cannot be the same.
I agree.
So I think you will always be the person who will learn. Maybe, the other generation, not the same. Maybe some of them. I think, but it's important. So I think people who are listening to us, they should think and reflect on it a bit. And all need to learn and we need to change. And I think we need to adapt with the new generation and they need to look up to us. But that's a bit difficult. So I think we need to adapt to them and see what we can take for them and what we can give.
And I think for the younger people, what I feel is mainly I feel that we need to inspire them. More than, you can't force anybody to look up to you. Now, if you inspire them enough for them to think that, hey, this one's making a difference in my life, in how I think, in how I do a job, I think that, it's a given that
You can't give GN like you used to give. Yeah, the gas are going to work. Gyan is over. That we got all the gyan. You know how much we listen to this. I mean, now some of my mother's gyan, I think, was all right. Yes, exactly. Same here. Yeah. So, how is, and my mother really laughs about that. Because I say, oh, yeah, mom, now, I think, yeah, what you said. I see what you're going, all those years ago. So let's talk about AI and marketing. How is AI changing the marketing landscape? I know this topic has been discussed, done to death on podcasts, but I want to hear a Norwegian point of view, what's happening in Norway, So how is AI changing the marketing landscape?
Right now it's the same. Like they're just using it for text, and then there are a lot of small companies that are pop up saying that we're using AI content and we're going to make the cost less, and they're doing all that. But I feel it's very important. Like you can do that for a while, but if you don't have that knowledge in the base, it won't last. So it's good to have that. It's fun because somebody might hire them because it's a little inexpensive, it's exciting. And if they don't know how to use the AI, they don't know that you can generate that yourself. I think it'll be exciting initially. But if you don't have that core knowledge and strategy, the long-term thinking, it will be bad for the business and it is not going to be lasting, I think so.
I agree. So what do you think? Can Gen AI replace strategy? Strategic minds?
No, I think to not like a little bit, yes, because we are feeding so much data, so you can get inspired by it. But I think that's where I would really, really ask the generation today, because we're losing that people touch because they're not talking to each other. I think that's something scary because we stop being innovative. I think that we should not do. We can use Gen AI, but I think we should have that capability of sitting in a room and discussing an idea and disagreeing. And I think that's important for the human brain. You need to do that. We need to guide it.
That's a very good point, because I normally, when I'm using Claude or ChatGPT, I'll say, okay, please give me a different point of view, or don't agree with me. Give me all the points which where I should think negatively about this, because otherwise it'll just become another echo chamber. That's right. So coming to Norway versus India, or Norway and India, what can India learn from Norway from a business perspective, from a public service perspective, and what can India learn from Norway and Norway learn from India?
I said that initially. I think India can get the discipline from Norway and Norway can take the speed from India. I think that's a perfect combination, because in Norway we have those, with the GDPR, we have some structure and things like that and time discipline and everything. India, we have the speed which Norway lacks. And that's what is my edge. That's been my edge, because I do so many things and everybody asks me, how do you do? I said, it's not a big deal. I like to do it, so I do it. So I think that's something we can, balance it out. That's the two things I feel. Because India, there are people at the end of the day, it's not much, but I think the speed that we lack in Norway can be inspired from the Indian hustle and the speed there, and that we can take the discipline here and be a great combination.
Yeah, I think Indians are really very, very smart, and they, honestly speaking, I think they can survive anywhere in the world and thrive.
Yes.
And of course, as we all know, some of the Indians who've gone on, they're leading the largest of Fortune 500 companies. And there's no doubt that I think there are good days ahead for India.
Yes, there is. And I think AI adoption is going to be rampant in India. It's already in urban areas. Yeah. It's
penetrated very well, and it's just a matter of time when once the language models are all in place. I mean, languages as in Indian languages. I think the sky is the limit.
Then while we'll be asking, hey, jhadu kaise lagana hai?
Yeah. Yeah, but unfortunately, that's the problem. I mean, it's now degenerated to that. But I think as human beings, we should see what else we can do, since some of the basic stuff can be delegated to AI. So that is the sad part of it. Like you earlier on said, that don't use it for the basics. I mean, yeah, basics, yes, fine, but use AI in a much more interesting fashion, which will add value to your life and add value to your client's life. I mean, this is how I would see it.
Well, just to add, Indians are respected a lot, Amaro. Like Indians have, like when you say from India, you have a different respect because as you said, they do well everywhere they go. Indians do have that, they carry that work ethics into wherever they go. So Indians are, and I'm very proud. I always say today, even though I have Norwegian passport, I've born here, so I can't say that. And I always say I'm an Indian Norwegian. I can't say. They always ask me, where do you come from? I said, I'm from India. I'm originally from India, but I've been in Norway for a long time. So I'm very proud of being an Indian. I never, hide from being an Indian. I'm very Indian. Like most of my Indian friends say that you're one of those Indians who live abroad who are still very Indian. I said, because I have nothing to hide. I've been living the same way that I lived in India. I'm living in Norway, nothing different.
Absolutely. No, that's so wonderful to hear. As we all know, in the last 3 to 4 months, there's been so much of negative press on Indians abroad. I am so glad to hear that, and it's truly heartening. So, Howard, we cannot complete this podcast without looking into the future. So, how do you think businesses are going to look 5 years down the line? I mean, I don't even want to say 10 and 20 years down the line, because I think the future itself is truncated today because we don't know what's going to happen next year with AI and so many other things happening around the world. So, what do you think a successful business will look like 10 years down the line, 5 years down the line? Will they be working less? Will people be working less? Like, so all these thought leaders from US think that people may not have, I mean, they may not need to work at all. So I always think, I mean, how are they going to eat if they don't work at all? So I that question has not been answered in my mind. But what do you think? In 5 years, is there going to be a dramatic difference in the way people run businesses and say, let's say Norway?
No, I don't think it will be people working less. I think maybe they'll work differently. The styles have to change. Leaders might to become a bit more reflective in the way they think and how they work. You need to take a step back and look, give it a bird's eye view on what's happening, because I think we get caught up in the everyday thing. I think that will be one of the key subjects, and that to match up with what's happening, to take a bit of the past and bit of what's going to happen now and the future. I think that's going to be important in a leader, whoever is going to run a business in the future, that they need to see the whole picture. It cannot just be, we just go after the technology and we forget the human skills, being a human. That will be your currency in the future. The social skills will be your currency. People who can talk to people will be the ones who will win. Because if you can be a technology lord, but if you're not able to have a conversation, that will be your currency, social currency. I tell my boys that if you don't know how to talk, then you're screwed. Because I think you need the collaboration, the human interaction, like you said, the argument, and different points of view. Very well said. So, if we had to ask this question as to what businesses should stop doing and what they should start doing, there are some irritants in every business, right? So, what is that one thing they should definitely stop doing, and the one thing which a business should start doing? I think I'll talk from the IT perspective. I think in IT, we have to stop focusing especially when you have product focus, the development focus so much. We should think business, tech, and this is not just business. Not just building, but get in the commercial part in a very early stage. Because a lot of tech businesses, as I said early on, they do that mistake of focusing on building product. And then you miss out on the commercial part. So I think there has to be two-way development here. There has to be a business person involved and a tech person involved. So there are 2 point of views as you're going ahead. I think that is something that tech companies have to keep in mind. The UI, how the people.
Basically, that's design thinking. So empathy for the end customer. What is the problem you're solving? Is there going to be a market for this? I mean, everybody cannot be Steve Jobs. Well, enterprise products. Yes. Understanding what a customer may want. But for the rest of us, I guess.
Because the audience is becoming smart, right? They're not going to go in for a girl standing with a soap and that's going to sell. No. It used to, but not now. So now we need to think a bit more differently, which touches, ad that touches my heart, which makes sense to my family and my situation, will make me interested to go and look at the product. But if you're just going to show me like tapping and It's just going to work. So I think that's any business, I think, has to be more reflective in how they produce or show their product in the future. It has to be, because the young generation, I've seen, they do talk that way. They are into that. They want that, that people are reflective and let's think about it and let's come back, and because that's the language they're learning. So how does businesses connect with that?
So what you're saying is not so transactional, or just say that this is the soap of the film stars.
Yeah.
But how does it affect me or my skin or my family?
Yeah.
And what are the ingredients in that soap?
Sustainability product. That's the big thing now. Yeah. And of course, you have to earn money. I always say, with all this, you have to earn money also at the end of the day. So don't get just focused on all the paperwork, but then, you have to make the business plan also has to be there. And of course,
The practicality of life one has to always consider. We have to look after our families and our employees. I agree with that. So now, as we are nearing the end of our podcast, we're going to do a rapid fire. Are you ready for it?
not really. Maybe
We just want one word answers, but okay, we'll try. Yeah. So if you had to give one word for leadership,
I would say reflective,
very nice. Entrepreneurship,
agile.
innovation.
I think you have to be open-minded.
Okay, I'll take that. AI,
I think their value to scale,
marketing.
strategy,
Wow. Norway,
always the steadiness,
India.
India, the diversity,
Oh, I was hoping you'd say dynamism. Success,
achievement,
failure.
failure. I think possibility.
Nice. I like that. Failure, possibility. It's for me, it's learning.
Yeah.
So with that, Hazel, you've been a lovely guest.
Thank
I think the viewers are going to get a lot out of this podcast. They will learn so much about way of doing business in Norway and the difference between Norway and India. We spoke about entrepreneurship, about business, about technology, about AI, about marketing. I think we covered a lot of ground in like half an hour. So thank you so much. Thank you for hosting you again.
It's, yeah.